I did my little tour of Kauai Beach and the Heiau and got to watch some young people bodyboarding. Checked out Abel's old garden and looked for any signs of actual archaeological study or county improvements or anything like that. Really didn't find anything other than the road being paved in here with dirt. Otherwise, things have pretty much been left alone, except for the removal of Abel's stuff. The question of whether that was done lawfully, whether Abel's claim to the land was valid, whether the county had, by any legal right other than eminent domain, did they have the jurisdiction to impose the removal of Abel on him. It was all carried out in a very unprofessional and sloppy manner, in my opinion, without the county ever coming forth and clarifying the situation in a way that would either give credence to Native Hawaiian rights or give credence to the county's right to control the land, other than by virtue of having a police force at its disposal. If it really has come down to a question of right by might, and if that is the original nature of the loss of sovereignty by this people and this island, if it was just a question of might is right, then I guess having the police come in and escort Abel away is a continuation of the same old. Maybe the most honest estimate of what Americans are like is the realization and the acceptance that as a culture we feel entitled to go around the world imposing our will by virtue of having more guns. There doesn't seem to be any sort of international recognition of the United States as the world's policeman. It seems to be a de facto situation that because the United States is the world's biggest bully, they play the role of being the world's policeman, and people call upon this country to exercise its might whenever they feel it suits them. I find it completely understandable that at this time in history there is such a widespread unease among Americans as to their leadership. They have unease about their future economically, unease about the climate and their weather, unease about their personal fortunes because of all the radical shifts in the economy that undermine their savings and their plans. In some ways, this is a great time of unease because the values of the culture have largely been eroded away and replaced by corporate interests, which boil down to the pursuit of profit. In the process, ethical considerations have been set aside. It's not the nature of corporation to have ethics. The so-called oxymoron business ethics is it's one of the most absurd things I've ever considered. Businesses don't have ethics. Humans may have ethics. And if you take the trouble to evaluate businesses as to their ethical nature, the only conclusion you can come to is that they are psychopaths. So, relying upon corporations to come to solutions for human problems that are ethical it's like asking the fox to guard the hen house. I mean, it's just not going to happen. What is more likely to happen is that businesses will make their short-term profits. The men at the top of them will become filthy rich, and the workers and everybody else will be used and abused and really have no recourse after it's all been done. So to the extent that even our government itself, the county, state, and federal governments, are by nature corporate, they're not really human entities. They're constructed by humans, but their true nature is corporation. And to the extent that politics has a concern for ethics, it is far less of a potent motivation than its concern for power and for the perpetuation of power. It doesn't surprise anyone at this point, having been witness to the history of the last 50 years of the United States since the Vietnam War, having seen presidents be assassinated, having seen presidents be deposed, and having seen that the choices between the two parties that are available to the American public is for the most extent not really a choice at all. It's just varying corporate interests that are looking for endorsement. And depending on the worker status of the people voting, whether they are up and coming entrepreneurs or they are rank and file union members, their politics are largely dictated by what is in their general financial interest. So until America ends up or is able to achieve a multi-party system where other more human considerations can be addressed and not overlooked or swept under the carpet, we are doomed to be the play toy of corporations that have far more time, money, and influence than any individual American can have. So it doesn't surprise me at all that many people are disenfranchised with their government. They're disenfranchised. They don't trust the police. They don't trust the system. Now, I come from an era of the 60s and 70s when not trusting the system was, par for the course in my generation, because of the system's stance on a couple of key factors, one being racial segregation, one being the Vietnam War and draft, and the third being the use of marijuana. Those three things probably helped to destabilize my generation's trust in the system more than anything else, at a time when actually it was still possible for an individual hardworking person to make enough money to buy a house and settle in some quiet suburban neighborhood and raise their children pretty much how they wanted to. That's become a lot more difficult in the last 20 years, and especially among poor inner city folks. The quality of their schools, the options available to them in their lives, the likelihood of imprisonment, and the general social repression that goes on by the mainstream system is ultimately a source of unresolvable discontent, and at least to my mind will likely result in some form of revolution. We are seeing all over the world major public protests where people are beginning to realize that in mass they can have at least sudden and unprecedented responses from the government by just getting together and sitting in a town square and shutting down businesses. To the extent that that is not an ultimate solution, but merely a tool that people have when they have a collective understanding of the nature of their repression, we can expect more and more of that. To the extent that the common people have other tools that are more proactive and legitimized by the system in order to make their grievances known and get some sort of realistic response, they will probably do that because it's in their best interest to do a long sustained change rather than waste a lot of their and other people's energy on a big flashy demonstration. But people have to believe in that process in order to actually pursue it. And to the extent that people are working 40-hour weeks and just barely surviving, or on food stamps and stuff, they don't seem to have the time and energy for the long-term dedication that, say, a group of lawyers working for a lobbying PAC would. The common people are not being paid to pursue their legal rights. They have to sacrifice their personal interests in order to dedicate themselves to achieving legal process. As long as that's true, I think we'll see more and more just acting out in the streets. But I would again say that to the extent that legitimate means of involvement in a local, state, and federal governing process can be made accessible and can be shown to be effective, that would make it easier on all of us. At any rate, here we have at Abel's camp the example of one person being willing to sacrifice all his comforts in order to make his point, which is, I believe, that he as a Hawaiian sovereign person has certain inalienable rights to live and farm and utilize the land in the way that his ancestors did. And his willingness to stand up for that and go head to head with the massive corporate structure of government is entirely commendable, regardless of the outcome. I'm Savory. I've been your guide for the day. My apologies for all of the personal opinion that I've put out here, but I'm really curious to know if the government of Hawaii actually has jurisdiction over the land in front of the Kamehameha statue. Thank you.